Hey everybody, this is SirenSongGaming with a new game guide for the Long Dark. This is coming for us to play with the new fishing mechanics from the new Frontier Comforts update. This will serve as a basic fishing guide for newer players as well. So just bear in mind that we may get some information you already know mixed in with hopefully some new information. I wanted to make this as inclusive of a guide as we could, just so that everybody kind of got started on the same playing field. So let's start. So in order to fish, you have to have a hook of some sort. It's pretty common knowledge. In the game, they provide a basic fishing tackle that you can find spawned around Lower Great Bear. You can also find it in the airfield. And you can find it in a few different ways. So you can either find a hook and a line, which you can then take in your personal crafting menu only. You cannot do this at a workbench. For some reason, it won't let you. In your personal inventory, you can actually turn that into a fishing tackle, which is the icon I have displayed next to the basic fishing tackle. Along with those, at a workbench, you can make the new lures. The bullet lure, acorn lure, and wire lure are included in the paid DLC, but the simple lure is included in the unpaid DLC, so it should be available for everybody. As a side note, if you do use a lure, you also are required to use a basic fishing tackle. If you do not find the implements to make a basic fishing tackle, you can make them. So at a workbench, if you take some scrap metal and some guts, so you need to cure those guts up, kill a rabbit, let it sit on the floor for a few days. You can turn the wire into some line, and you turn the scrap metal into some hooks, and then you can take those, combine them together, and then you have some basic fishing tackle. Nothing super exciting there. However, it's actually really basic and important that you know. So, making the darn things. Pretty simple. So after you have your fishing tackle built, there's 4 other lure options that you can choose from. The first is your simple fishing lure, and that's just scrap metal. There's nothing else fancy about it. All lures are made at a workbench, and they all require 50 minutes to craft. So make sure you have enough food and water to sustain you during that time. It does take longer than you would think, and you do only make one at a time. So the second lure is the fishing lure made from the revolver casing. I'll be shortening these down to make them a little bit easier to differentiate because in the game they're all just called fishing lure. So I'm going to call one bullet lure, one acorn lure, and one wire lure throughout this, just to make it easier. So for the bullet lure, we need the revolver casing, a feather, and some scrap metal. For the fishing lure, the wire lure, you need a wire, a feather, and some scrap metal. And then for the acorn, you need obviously acorns. Unprocessed acorns, you want to make sure they still are intact. Feathers and a scrap metal. Even though each one of the lures displays multiple feathers, it is only 1 feather per. And as a fun tip from the wiki, apparently each one of these lures was meant to look like some sort of bug. So that's why they, apparently, like for example, the bullet casing was meant to look like a dragonfly. I thought that was pretty cool. All right, so now we've made your hooks. Now what do we do? So fishing is done in increments of hours determined by the player. So when you open up the fishing menu, you're gonna, I guess I could show you. We are going to actually go where it says hours to fish, so we can select multiple hours here. Now this menu also gives you the options to use a lure and bait. I obviously don't have any lures in my inventory. I do have them laid out here though. So we have our simple lure, the acorn lure, the wire lure, and the casing lure or the bullet lure. So you would actually come into this fishing hut. I like to keep mine pretty homey looking. I like to keep some wood outside of mine as well, keep some stuff. We do have the tip-ups. I didn't play with any of the tip-ups just yet. That's next on my to-do list, but it took me so long to get this video out that I wanted to get it posted before the weekend was over. So all you would do is click on this. I'm trying to see, it's not freezing back over again, but this would be frozen solid, and you would be told, basically, given the option to basically tap off the ice. So you would tap off the ice. with a tool. I'll go over which tools are best, which ones are worst, and yeah, so we can go back to this. All right, so pick your amount of time you want to fish. Basically, the more hours back to back that you select, the more fish you can catch. So ideally, you would do more than an hour at a time. For this video and for the information later in this video, I did it in hour increments just because it was the easiest way to kind of number how the lures were doing. But ideally, if you're going to go fish for some food or for something else, do it in like 2 or 4 hour increments. Make sure you have food and water to do it, and you can actually make food and water while you fish anyway. So it's a good way to kill some time. Usually I recommend finding a fishing hut. Before that was the only way to fish, but now that's not so much the case. So you can go and actually make your own fishing holes now if the body of water is deep enough. And then just go do it. So the best way to get comfortable with fishing is just doing it. So get out there, get your fishing level up. The more fish you catch, the quicker your ice fishing level goes up. Evidently, the size of the fish is rumored to not have anything to do with the amount of experience you get from the fish. So you really just have to get out there and catch as much as you can. If your line breaks during a long scheduled session of fishing, so if you have 2 or 3 hours and your line breaks within the first hour, you do need to reset it again. You didn't waste those 2 or 3 hours, but you'll have to start that over again. So just, cast a new line and be done. I like to try to keep in one fishing hut and have all of the stuff I would need to make more as I go. I usually keep like 20 or so with me because when I fish for like marathon amounts of time. I bring over like I don't know, 4 days worth of firewood with me, and I just like sit there for a long time. So it's a good way to get food. It's a good way to stave off cabin fever. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Then one of the new items in the new DLC or the new expansion is the tip ups. They can be utilized to passively catch fish. You basically add a tip up to the fishing hole, and same thing. You would attach a lure and bait. And you can set that, kind of set it and forget it. If you do catch a fish while you're nearby, you'll hear a bell. You can run over and basically catch your fish there. The devs did mention in the DLC that if you have a large amount of tip-ups in the same area, it can reduce the efficacy of that method. So they don't want you to have like 10 or 15 of them in one area. You're going to see some reduction in your outputs in those situations. So they just don't want you to farm the hell out of it, it sounds like. So fishing level, how much does it actually matter? So levels 1 through 5, just like most other things in this game, the stats do matter a decent amount. So at level 1, it's your basic fishing skill. There's no multipliers. It kind of sucks, I'm not going to lie. You kind of just got to push through all the line breaking. Level 2, the fishing time is reduced by 5%, so that's 5% less during each fish that you catch. And there's an 8% chance of the line break on the catch. So it gets lower and lower the higher your skill level. So as you go down, 3, same thing. Fishing time is reduced by 10%. There's a 5% chance of line break on the catch. Level 4, there's 10%. I think that was meant to be fishing time reduced by 20%. Oh, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. So it's 10% to average fish weight, fishing time reduced by 20%, and 3% chance of line break. So it does give you bigger fish, so you'll catch more. So the bigger fish you'll catch. Reduces your fishing time by 20%, and it's 3% chance of line break on catch. So see how that line break percentage gets smaller? Yeah. So level 5 is 25% to average fish weight. Fishing time is reduced by 30%. There's a 1% chance of line break on catch, so you'll always still have a chance to break a line. And I read that the max weight of a fish you can catch is increased as well. That one wasn't on the wiki, however, it was down at the bottom. Somebody had commented that they did kind of like a study that they were able to catch bigger coho salmon at level 5 than they were before. So they found the maximum was higher, the higher their fishing level, and at 5, it would make sense that your fish would be as big as they could get. So another new function they added in this DLC is bait. And here's what we know about it so far. Very simple. To obtain it, you go into a menu and harvest up a fish. You'll get anywhere between 5 and 9 pieces depending on the size of the fish. When you use a fishing bait, the minimum weight of any fish that is caught is increased by 50%. And then on unsuccessful casts. So if you don't catch anything, not when your line gets broken. So if you cast, don't catch anything, your bait isn't consumed and it's actually returned to your inventory. That's something I found out on my own. Let me know if anybody else is seeing any inconsistencies with that, but it would make sense that if you didn't catch anything, your bait's still on your hook. It should still be usable. The other thing I found with fishing bait is it doesn't seem to affect which types of fish you catch. It just seems to increase the weight. So I did casts with and without, and they're pretty similar. There's some variation, but I also would expect some variation just because my sample size was pretty small. So I expect that if you were to do thousands and thousands of casts and average them out, the results would probably be pretty similar. So fishing huts. Fishing huts used to be the only way you can fish, but now that you have the option, I would really still recommend fishing in huts. Huts are placed on the ice and provide shelter while fishing, so you can only do one hole at a time, but you could theoretically be fishing in one hole, have a couple tip-ups outside, and then be protected from predators. So you are safe from predators in these fishing huts. Wolves can wake survivors in lower difficulties. So in the higher difficulties like Stalker and Interloper, you'll just get eaten in your sleep. But in the lower difficulties, Pillager, Voyager, I think if there's an enemy that's aggroed on you nearby, you'll actually wake up out of your sleep so you can defend yourself. Huts have a pre-made fishing hole in them that you have to break up with a tool. You can use a hunting knife, an axe, a hammer, or a, what's that word? The blue one? The pry bar. That's the one. They all have a potbelly stove, which you can use for warmth. You can actually make water and food on it too. So you can make yourself a nice little self-sustainable hut, and you can live there for a while. Most huts, and they say most because there are the exception, the one in Ash Canyon doesn't have a roof on it, but most of them will give you a +3 degrees Celsius temperature bonus. So you'd have to convert that back out. And it's a great place to have as a secondary base to avoid cabin fever. So what I like to do is when I get cabin fever risk, I go spend like 3 or 4 days outside in the fishing hut fishing and catching and stuff like that, because cabin fever is actually averaged over a period of time. So if you spent more time indoors than outdoors over, say, a week, your average is going to start teetering in the way of you're going to get cabin fever. With the recipes now, it's not as bad. You can kind of break that up a little bit, but really you could, for free, go take your bedroll outside or leave a bedroll in your fishing hut and just go sit outside for a few days. Sometimes I'll take that time to go harvest up wood and leave it by my fishing hut or by the house. And I'll just return to the fishing hut in bad weather or predators, things like that. The other really sneaky thing you can do with fishing huts is bears and wolves, they won't come through the doorway. So I would not say stand in the doorway, but if you stand just back beyond the doorway, you can shoot a bear or a wolf relatively safely. You have to watch so you don't get caught up on anything you have outside, you don't get caught up on the door, things like that. But you can fairly safely shoot a bear on the ice right by a fishing hut and harvest it and cook it right there if you really wanted to. I've done it before. It's pretty cool. So what tools should you use to break up the ice? This is actually something I learned from doing this. So this is the break rate that you're going to see here is based on something that's completely frozen. So something like a pry bar, while it takes longer, it does less damage to the tool. So pry bar and heavy hammer are essentially the same. They both take 45 minutes. It's both 2% of the decay on your item. Something like a hatchet only takes 20 minutes, but it is 5% of your tool. Hunting knife, same thing, 5%, but it's 40 minutes. And then when you get into the improvised stuff, it really messes up your improvised stuff. So if in Interloper, if you can get lucky and find a pry bar, it looks like your best case scenario there would be maybe to use a pry bar, as it only is 2% decay. Counter argument there is that you can also just repair the heavy hammer with some wood. It's pretty easy to repair, so you'd have to pick whichever one you like best. For me personally, I like to use the pry bar or the hatchet. But it does really ding up your hatchet. I typically don't carry a heavy hammer with me, especially when I'm fishing. Fish are already heavy enough. And then the hunting knife, the hunting knife already gets used to open cans if you're not paying attention. So I try really hard to pick the pry bar in most situations. Might take a little bit longer, but it's less damage to your pry bar. And I usually have like 5 or 6 of them in different places that I leave because I don't need them. So I typically don't have a shortage of pry bars anywhere. All right, so it's time to play with the new lures. Here's the rules that I used. So basically, in order to keep this as vanilla as possible and get rid of any outside factors that could affect my fishing results, I used the same day in a save. So I would fish until the end of the day, and then I would exit the game, go back in, and start over again, basically. So that all of the fishing I did was from sunup to sunset, and I would reset at the end of sunset. Um, so all the results are from 100 casts from each hook type, with and without bait. So basically 200 casts for each type. Um, if a line broke during one of my sessions, the session was dismissed and it was not recorded, and each cast is a 1 hour segment of time. It's hard because there's no good way um, to kind of calculate how many fish you'll catch in longer periods of time and try to compare that. So I thought it was easier from that sense to just do a bunch of 1 hour segments of time. I had my fishing level at 2 here. It helped me reduce line breakage, and I figured it would avoid altering results too much since most players, when they're getting started in fishing, are going to be probably 2 or 3. I think it takes a while to get to 5. So we may eventually go back and do a fishing 5 comparison and see what's different, but um, I don't know how worth it is. It's not really make or break in the game. So I would say take any of the results that I have here with a grain of salt. This is considered a small sample size. We're talking about percentages, and anybody that knows anything about studies and things like that, it's almost an inappropriate size sample, but it's a good way to kind of get an overview on what these things will do with 100 casts. But it took a lot of time to do this, so I would say it's still good to look at the data, but I wouldn't, call it concrete and worship Jesus over it, if you know what I mean. The only testing I did was saltwater fish. We did everything in coastal. I'll do a freshwater set soon, just not right now, because there's different fish in freshwater, and I'll get you percentages on those too, if we like them. If it's not worth it, I won't do it. We did not use tip-ups in anything on this because I wasn't sure how to go ahead and make that go through in a way that made sense. So the first setup that we did was 100 casts of basic tackle with no bait. What I found was 37 times my line, I didn't catch anything. We had 34% of the time I caught a rainbow trout, 12% of the time I caught a salmon, 1% of the time I caught the new red Irish lord, and 1% of the time I caught a rockfish. And there were 2 casts where I caught 2 different fish. So if you look at the breakdown on these fish themselves, so I caught 78 total fish during those 100 casts. So 70% of the fish that I caught were rainbow trout, 23% were coho salmon, 3.8% were rockfish, and 2.6% were the red Irish lord. And that was pretty close. So similar results for the basic tackle with bait. So we had 48 times when I cast a line, I didn't get anything. 25 times I caught a rainbow trout. 14 times I caught a salmon. 7 times I caught a rockfish. 4 times I caught a red Irish lord. And there were 2 times where I caught multiple fish per catch. Similar results here on the fish themselves. We caught 71 total fish. 44% of the, or sorry, 62% of the time, so 44 fish were rainbow trout, 24 coho salmon were caught, and that was about 33% of the time. We caught 2 rockfish, so it was 2.8% of the total fish we caught, and we caught 1 red Irish lord, which was 1.4% of the fish we caught. Getting into the new stuff, so now we have the simple lure. Simple lure, I would say compared to the basic tackle, we had more success on each cast. So 33% of the time we didn't catch anything, but that meant 38% of the time we caught rainbow trout or coho salmon. And then same results in terms of red Irish lord and the rockfish, very similar there. And we didn't catch any multiple fish catches. But the fish we caught, if you look at the shake-up, is actually pretty different, gives you a good chance to be able to catch the newer fish. So we caught 26 rainbow trout, which is about 48% of the fish we caught. We caught 54 total fish, I should start there. We caught 16 coho salmon, which turned out to be almost 30% of those fish. 4 rockfish we caught, and then 8. Those are backwards, so it should be, that looks backwards to me. So probably what that should say is that we caught 4 red Irish and 8 rockfish. I think I switched those. Yeah, I think I switched them. Okay. So the next one, same lure with bait, pretty similar results in the top. Down the bottom, we caught 29 rainbow trout, 10 coho salmon, rockfish about 17%, or 17 fish we caught, and 3 red Irish lord. For 59 total fish. I'm not going to keep reading this stuff up to the side. I feel like it's kind of boring. I will say for the next one though, look at your null percentage now. So 47% of the time we didn't catch anything with this lure. When we move into the newer lures, that number goes way up. So with the new lures, I would say the amount of times you don't catch anything is significantly higher with single hour casts. So I caught less fish with this, but I caught more new fish, if that makes sense. So with the bullet lures, I was finding that about 3/4 of the time I was coming back with nothing. But when I did catch something, instead of it always being a rainbow trout, there's a higher chance of getting a rockfish. Red Irish Lord were higher, so on this one we had 73% of the time we didn't catch anything. 12% of the time it was a rainbow trout. 2% of the time it was a coho. 8% on that rockfish, and 2% on the Red Irish Lord. And then we had 2 casts where we caught more than 1 fish. On this one, you can see the numbers are vastly different. We only caught 30 total fish here. In 100 hours. So we caught 16 rainbow trout, 3 salmon, 9 rockfish, and 2 red Irish Lord. What I would say with this is while those numbers are kind of disheartening, look how many rockfish we caught, which are supposed to be rare. Keep that in mind. And we got similar results on the next one with bait. I would say if you look at if you kind of compare the 2 charts here, they are relatively the same. They're pretty darn close. I would say comparable, the top half. And then bottom half, we caught 16 rainbow trout, 3 salmon, 9 rockfish, and 2 red Irish Lords for a total of 30 fish. $39 fish on this one, sorry. So 23, 5, 9, and 2 on that one. Next one is the wire. Wire is actually, when I did these 2, it looks like it was a little bit more successful per cast. So that null number, instead of it being 70 plus, it's a little under 70. So about 65% of the time we didn't catch anything, but we caught 12% rainbow trout, 10% coho, 6% rockfish, 4% red Irish, and then 2 casts with more than 1. And I mean, look at the comparison between the bullet and the wire. It's an even higher number of rare fish that you're catching, and you're still catching some other stuff mixed in. So I would say coho salmon don't seem to like the wire. They like it a lot less if you compare to with bait. So this is with bait. This is without bait. So you can see those numbers really jump back around. So the rainbow trout, we caught 24. We caught 1 coho, 14 rockfish, and 9 red Irish. That was without bait, so that was 48 total fish. With bait, we caught 34 total fish, but we caught 13 rainbow trout. We actually caught more rockfish than we caught rainbow trout, which is pretty impressive. We caught 3 coho salmon and 2 red Irish Lord, so pretty good there. And then we have the acorn. Acorn seems to be the more efficient of the lures as well. We caught something 58% of the time, or we didn't catch anything 58% of the time on this one, on both accounts. So more effective per catch, but not as efficient for the bigger fish. You're back to seeing more rainbow trout here. We caught 19% of the time we caught a rainbow trout, 9% we caught a coho, 8% we did catch a rockfish, which is nice. We didn't catch any single red Irish Lords. They were caught within the multiple cast. So anytime you see fish down the bottom, but the numbers up at the top don't quite correspond, it's because the when we talk about multi-fish casts, I did kind of lump them together into one category and then put them in at the bottom. So you may see some discrepancies where even at the top it says red Irish Lord is 0%. We did actually catch two, but we either caught them together or we caught them alongside something else. So anybody questioning that, that's why. So we caught 25 total rainbow trout, 9 coho salmon, 12 rockfish, and 2 red Irish Lord for a total of 48 fish. And then I didn't put the total on this one, but I don't know why I didn't do it, but so on this one, same difference, 24 rainbow trout, 1 coho salmon, 14 rockfish, and 9 red Irish Lords. So we caught a total of 48 fish. It's pretty comparable to this one. If you look at the difference, we caught more rockfish this time, so I'm going to say that's just variation between what you could catch, but pretty good results either way. So what does all this mean? I know I just gave you a bunch of boring nonsense and stuff, but now you can kind of see them all next to each other. I'll leave this up for a second so you guys can look through what we've done. You can kind of see the comparisons a little bit better on this screen. Feel free to pause, take screenshots, use this, whatever. Just if you're going to reference it, just go ahead and put my name somewhere on it if you don't mind. That would be fantastic, just so people know to come back to find me to ask any questions on this data. So yeah. So in terms of these, here's what I would say, and this is all my opinion, obviously. It depends on what you're going to do in terms of fishing. So if you're looking to catch fish just to eat, my recommendation would be maybe stick with the basic fishing tackle or the simple one. You're getting more fish per cast, so your percentages are higher per cast to catch fish in general. You have higher percentages of time that you're going to catch maybe a coho salmon, which are bigger, more calories, things like that. Whereas if you're looking for specific fish, so if you're looking for the rockfish or the red Irish Lord, you might want to try one of these lures to see which one you like best. Or what's available to you. So if you're playing on interloper, you might not be able to make the bullet casing one at all because there's no bullets in interloper. So you may want to try one of the wires or one of the acorn ones. Or if you haven't found any wire yet and you like the wire one, maybe try the acorn one. They're all pretty similar, I would say. So here's kind of where my results are here. I would say rainbow trout are fat and they still like everything. They'll eat whatever. They're a nice like 2 to, I think they go up to like 6 pounds or something like that. They're okay to eat. Lures seem to increase the chances of catching rare fish, but ultimately have a lower fish per cast rate. What I mean there is if you look at the green section on those pie charts, that's the amount of times we didn't catch something. So if you go back and look at the charts there, when we used the lures, we caught less fish. We just caught more quality fish. We compare the two. Rockfish seem to like any of the new lures, but the wire lure seems to attract the most red Irish Lord as well. So if you look back here, the wire lure, we got 9. These results are all the lures with no bait. So on the wire, we caught 9 red Irish and 14 rockfish, whereas like the acorn, we caught 12 rockfish, we only caught 2 red Irish, and the same, kind of with the bullet casings. Depending on what you're fishing for is really what should determine what lure you use, or if you don't use one at all. There's not one that seems like it's better than any other one. And that's kind of what I wanted to explore and explain with all of this. The simple lures seem to have the best catch, the cast per, catch per cast ratio. Ask somebody that's dyslexic to say that a few times. And has a slightly increased chance to catch rare fish. So if we go back to this, I mean, overall, I would say the simple lure is probably the one I will use the most frequently, just because it gives you a chance to get the rarer fish to cook with, but you're not losing out on any of the other ones in the meantime. So that's just my personal opinion, is I'll probably default to the simple lure. They're cheap to make, you don't need anything fancy, and they give you a good shot at getting whatever you want. And the basic tackle seems to have the best catch per cast ratio of rainbow trout. So in most situations, you're going to want to just default to that basic if you just need food. But it does have the lowest chance to catch rare fish if you look back here. So we only caught 5 rare fish total out of 78 fish. But we were still able to catch them. The percentages are just lower. But if you think about it, that's 55 pounds or 55 fish that we caught. And you figure they average anywhere between 3 and 5 pounds. It's a lot of fish meat. And also the ability to eat for quite some time. So here's the thing. So there's the argument of, do I waste time fishing? Do I not waste time fishing? So all that information I just give you is great, but why do I bother fishing? While fish, in my opinion, are not as calorically dense as some other foods, they are good. And I say passive in a way of you don't need to go hunt. You're not putting yourself out too much. Not passive as in like you don't have to do anything. The new tip-up system does make it truly passive, but you don't have to use the tip-ups for a still a passive way to feed yourself. So you want to keep that well-fed bonus. You want to get the well-fed bonus. I know it's harder in the higher difficulties, but you can keep yourself fed pretty well just by fishing. You're not chasing rabbits. You're not chasing ptarmigan. You're not chasing and wasting ammo on deer. Wolves, if you're in the higher difficulties, you can't eat that predator meat until you're level 5 cooking. And fish actually cook relatively quickly in a pan. I think it's down to like 20 minutes per fish in the pan for a good amount of calories. So I like it. I would rather eat one heavier item that's more calories than a bunch of smaller ones. And that's just me personally. The other reason I like fishing is it's a great way to productively pass time outdoors and it can stave off your cabin fever risk, which in the higher difficulties can really make or break your game because you can't sleep inside, but if there's a blizzard, you're kind of in trouble. So if you're able to keep that balance so that when there is a blizzard, you can go inside instead of outside. I've seen some players that live in a fishing cabin because it's just as easy. And once you get enough insulation, you, in most regions, are probably fine and don't have to worry about keeping that fire lit anyway, but you could bring your wood pile outside and hang out there for a while. And I would say the biggest thing with fishing, even if you don't want to eat your fish, is fishing provides a renewable source of lantern fuel. So that lantern fuel is obtainable by cooking fish. You get approximately 0.1 to 0.3 liters per fish, which you'll get in the form of the lantern cans. Or if you have a jerry can, while you're cooking the fish, you'll collect your fuel in the jerry can. So it's worth keeping a jerry can around with you because if you compare the weights, the jerry can actually more efficiently carries the same amount of weight as the small containers. So if you can get all your lantern into that jerry can, it's a lot better for you to travel with. And guys, that's all I have for you today. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to throw it in the comment section below. But all in all, I would say, let's get fishing. I will talk to you guys later, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Later, Gators.